C'è una tavola rotonda. In that case,
Rodan, are you here?
yes.
Yeah.
Sarà massa. Sí, claro. Los 2 kilos pueden ser ahí.
Déjame buscar uno.
Los soci adesso sai. Però
Sì, lascia un po'.
mi saranno in tempo. Maybe that's to show during the talk.
Then I went on to like yes. And she's like,
You're doing very well.
next yeah.
Okay.
We were good at like six or giving you something to say. I don't know. I like the quantity. Yeah. No, I have my friends.
Gracias. No sé cuánto
Bueno,
Así que tenemos más paralelos a
Okay, thank you. Thank you for being here and staying with us. Online. To them as well. So this is supposed to be a round table, but we can do 3 rounds. It's about the future of the school. So the justification for this round table is that this book is supposed to be a kind of state-of-the-art book. So each of the chapters that you could read was meant to summarize 20 years of history in a particular field of subject. Right? And the idea is that we can use this book both for teaching and education, but also for trying to identify what the future look like, at least in terms of research. So, and we have asked Mario, Vicky, and Daniela to kindly accept our invitation to be here with us and to precisely to identify how the future looks like. So we posed them a general question about what are the knowledge frontiers they have identified in their respective fields of work, knowledge systems, environmental justice, and social metabolism. And then we will have the following dynamic. I mean, each of them will have like a 10 minutes presentation, and we'll be open for the questions, right? We're starting already late. Sorry about that. I don't know how. We have to finish at 12.
12:10 max, because then we need to be at 12:30.
So we have a coffee failure. We have market failures and coffee failures. But please, the floor is yours. Vicky will start, and then Daniel and then Mario, and then we will have unfortunately very few minutes for questions and answers. But see, most of you live here and study here. You can post this in the
Okay, thank you, Luzan. So I'm just gonna, I mean, that's the question they asked to answer is this: what's the main knowledge frontier, right? And I work mostly with indigenous knowledge and local knowledge systems. And I was thinking, I mean, it's a very informal, no, it's a brainstorm idea. So I have three main ideas that I think are in this kind of like knowledge frontier of how we should go about it. The first one is this idea of these plural knowledge systems in itself, no? Because I think maybe here people who are in this room might have some concepts or some ideas of that we live in different worlds, right? Each of us as an individual, but also as cultures, right? We don't understand the world in the same way. And it doesn't has to do only with the way you know, what you know, but it also with your worldviews, with like your values, etc. And although this might be an idea that it's not so strange for this audience, I think it's not out there. No? So there is out there is still this idea that science is a universal value, no? that we are progressing, no? Towards like a scientific. So this idea of that there are these plural knowledge systems, and that they are expressed in different language, and this is something that Joan has always like talk about these languages of valuation. No? There are different ways in which you express this knowledge that can be, I mean, we always talk of art or, but it could also be, for example, spirituality. No? I'm just saying that because I am recently collaborating in this kit-based assessment on transformative change. And then someone started bringing all these things about the Bible and how the nature relation with nature was expressed in the Bible. And I was just taken back because we have like, I mean, spirituality is okay, but the Bible and the Catholic religious, it's just, and it's very, you know, we're just saying, this is very kind of like internalized that Catholic, it's different and we are not that open at the end to understand that maybe this knowledge system of this other person. So how do you actually recognize this plurality even when it's against what you think it's the way that should be? And that also takes us to the question: there's all these different ways of staying in the war and understanding the war and expressing that. Are they all legitimate? Do we actually, the one who thinks that the way of treating nature is abusing has the same voice, it has to be the same rights to participate in the discussion. So how do we actually legitimize or put all this knowledge together? And then of course, that will also bring to a conversation of the colonizing the knowledge institutions. So knowledge institutions is kind of like the university, and we are based in this scientific knowledge of what we do. And so how do you actually bring, or do they have a place? Is it a place to be here? So it's a conversation to actually, how do you operationalize this idea that there are plural knowledge systems, there are plural knowledge ways of understanding the world, being in the world, relating to the world, no? How do you bring them or legitimize them? So that will be like the first frontier, this conversation about different worlds and different ways of thinking through plural knowledge systems. The same, I think, knowledge frontier in this conversation is and related to the Barcelona School will be this idea of how these different knowledge systems have an impact in the material world, right? So how your values, because one thing is to think, okay, I value the tree because I can sell it, or I value the tree because it's the spirit of my father, right? But then how these different ways of understanding or being in the world have an effect in the material world. And I think, of course, from what I come, like all indigenous views of the world have preserved most of the wildlife in the area. We have this discourse, but how much this is actually part of the reality, or I mean, understanding these relationships between value systems and worldviews and aspects of the material world. Okay, I believe degrowth, but that degrowth will save the world. Is it true that these values that I reduce my consumption, it's a new value? Is it true that this is going to impact the world, the physical world, nature in some way? So I think that might be the second knowledge frontier. No? So the first one is in understanding all these different ways of being in the world. The second way is understanding better how these different views or understanding of the world actually, of humans, no, actually impact the nature of the non-human world, or actually the humans. And the third knowledge frontier will be finding ways of reaching or putting them together in the same table. No? And I think here there has been all this is not new, no? This all post-normal science talks about, okay, how do you bring the different stakeholders? But I think, well, I mean, I don't know a lot of post-normal science, but I think from there is more about interest. No? You have different groups of interest negotiating. And I think it's more about different groups that see the world in different ways and how you actually put them together to talk. No, I always use this example of like, okay, if an indigenous person is in the IPBS and say to a policymaker, I dream of that, I don't see how this policymaker is gonna take that seriously, right? Because I mean, you cannot blame the policymaker somehow because they just have a different worldview, you know? So how do you actually get to a dialogue between knowledge systems that actually, yeah, I'm done, basically. How do you actually get to this dialogue between knowledge systems? Because you have like all these power imbalances and all this. So it's not only about putting the people together, no, it's also, there is like all these like power issues and who decides and the conflicts that are going to arise, who represents our knowledge, no? As a scientist, I always talk about indigenous people as if it was my knowledge system, when I probably don't understand. So I have already given I thought it was short, but I have 10 minutes. So these are the three knowledge frontiers. Yeah.
Thanks a lot. Thanks a lot, Vicky. And then we'll listen to you again.
Yeah, so on me, it's the reflection on the potential future of environmental justice studies. So, but first of all, I also wanted to remind and honor the history we come from in environmental justice studies. And for that, now I'm telling you what this is. And for that, I brought three representatives or three symbols of three major steps or three major turns in environmental justice studies. The first one, we all remember, or some of us might remember, some others are maybe learning from books, but the struggles in the 80s against toxic waste dumping. So here you have batteries as a symbol of the landfills that disproportionately affected Black and Latino and marginalized communities, especially in the 80s, where traditionally, let's say, we mark the birth of this new social movement for environmental justice. But environmental justice movements were not only concerned about the distribution or the unfair distribution, the uneven distribution of bads and goods, but also dealt and tackle and cover the cases or the many struggles against unwanted projects. So the histories of the stories of people who defend their territories and their rivers, for example. And this bottle contains drops of water from different rivers that are being defended around the world. It's also to honor those struggles and keep them with us today, let's say. And a third major turn in environmental justice studies look at the power of transformations that movements bring forward and defend. So the collective construction of alternatives that include alternative visions, alternative and differing ways of looking at the world and understanding the world. So for that, I choose some manure from my neighbors, which are horses, as a symbol of the power of regeneration of soil and the collaboration also between different people, human and other than human, to regenerate the soil and nurture also life. So having this brief history, let's say, in mind, that I think reflects more or less what many of us here do at ICTA and in our circles. I try to, some menu here. So I try to, let's say, to visualize some blocks, some lines of work, let's say, in environmental justice studies. So the first one is resistance, so anti-extractivist struggles, especially in the new expanding frontiers of extraction, in the context, for example, of the energy transition, climate change, mitigation policies. Other issues such as I'm just mentioning them without going into details because there are many. So the neoliberal conservation, for example, as in frontiers of land extraction and dispossession, the health perspective on the planetary health, for example, urban gentrification, housing rights, also this whole body of work on iconographies and artistic and cultural practices, thinking and developing environmental justice concepts as well. Also environmental justice and militarized and armed conflicts. This is something that is maybe not so developed, but it's absolutely important. Also the convergence between environmental justice and agrarian justice or labor activism, and the whole body of work on indigenous peoples as the forces for sustainability, for as key environmental defenders and stewards, let's say, or guardians of nature. And also a line of work that we have been developing in the last months, I would say, here at ICTA as well, contributing to the corporate social irresponsibility and the business political ecology. So how environmental justice can contribute to denounce malpractices or crimes and systematic abuses by companies. The second block is on transformations and the construction of alternatives. So looking at how environmental movements build socio-ecological transformation, what transformation actually means, what is to be transformed, what is transforming itself? Is it just the technology or maybe even, social relations that underpin the use of a certain technology or the way we live in a certain community or territory. Then, for example, we also have the urban food networks and solidarity networks, the urban commons as a large area for research. And this will also help us reconceptualize also concepts such as well-being or the concept of buen vivir, vida sabrosa, so redefining what we were told is development. So how we can redefine and reimagine how a good and dignified life is and looks like. As a last point for the transformations alternatives block, I would mention environmental justice and emotional healing in a time of ecological breakdown and the loss of biodiversity. As the following block, I would mention methodologies. So how what is the contribution of environmental justice studies in how we do research, how we conduct research. For us as a group, critical cartography has been key and very important, especially around the EJ Atlas, but also perspectives or approaches such as the comparative and statistical analysis and political ecology. The following block, I would call it plural ontologies. And here I would include different lines that there are different approaches of ecofeminisms, decolonial studies, decolonial ecology, for example. but also more recent reflections around what would an indigenous environmental justice mean. And there are scholars, just Deborah McGregor and others, who try to think what justice means, for example, for indigenous peoples. Of course, she talks about her own communities, but justice can be framed differently, maybe in different indigenous contexts. And here you can see many bridges also with local knowledges. I also want to mention here the Latin America academic contribution with the concept of cuerpo territorio, for example, understand your body as the first territory you inhabit. How is it translated? Community-based feminism, no? Feminismo comunitario. So there are all a bunch of exciting or challenging concepts here. For example, the multi-species environmental justice, so how we can understand it beyond the group of human people as inhabitants of this planet. What about all the other species? The plurality of ontology and epistemologies in understanding justice, how we learn about justice and how we make experience of it. As a last point, precisely, is pedagogies. So we also had in our group this reflection on how we can develop new or innovative educational tools and pedagogies for environmental justice, and how we can consolidate the whole generation of knowledge or co-production of knowledge. Both terms are used between the academia and activists, practitioners, and how we can blur a bit that distinction, which is not really, which is also a bit false, right? Many of us are both practitioners or activists and researchers. So yeah, I will leave it here maybe.
Thanks a lot, Daniela. The complementary points of course with the biggest so now we move to
Coming to what is the possible role of future of metabolism in sustainability science, I believe that it has an enormous role, because if you're looking at what's going on now, sustainability science is a disaster, especially on the quantitative analysis. We still are told that we will decarbonize in 5 years, that the circular economy, an enormous amount of policy legend that basically means that we can, with more technology, more business model, you have to give money to the banks, then we can solve all our problems. It basically shows that the clash of reductionism on complex things. So what is the metabolism bring in is complexity. The metabolism is what makes possible for us to adapt and preserve our identity. The metabolism is what prevents the civil system to decay because of the entropy. So what is the point? That is a complex things. In order to have a metabolic pattern, you must have energy to start with. Let's imagine the muscle, then you cultivate land. From the land, you get food. From the food, you get back the energy that you spent at the beginning with the surplus. With the surplus, you do additional things that are required to keep you alive. So you start looking. But you're looking at metabolic analysis, they just have an input-output of energy. Energy doesn't exist. You have different energy form. You have energy form inside you, or in a society would be electricity, fuel, the things we can use. Then you have primary energy sources that are outside, coal, the wind, the sun. These are different type of energy form. You cannot sum 1 joule of coal to 1 joule of electricity. They are two different things. Not even electricity you can sum. You have electricity, peak electricity. When you need it, you push a turbine, you get electricity. And you have intermittent things that they are there when they are not the same. I mean, we are really, really in a sloppy accounting of quantitative analysis. So what happened in the metabolism give you the possibility of making distinction. When you're talking about primary energy sources, how much you need from the environment, how the environment is limiting yours. When you're talking about inside, for using energy to get energy inside, this is about the technology, the capital, the things. When you're talking about what you do with this energy to stabilize the things, why you are using energy in the first place. So when you talk about why would be the growth, why we are doing this, when you're talking about can we do it, it's a technical issue. When you're talking about what we need from the environment, is about studying the ecological. What is important with the metabolism is that the all three things has to be discussed at the same time. You cannot discuss about what we would like to do. You have to say what we can do. And what we can do is depend on inside, because we do not have know-how, technology, or depend outside, because there are no. The law of thermodynamics tells you the energy cannot be made. This is something the economists have problem in understanding, but unfortunately is the way it is. So why also it is important? Because according to, I don't know how many of you knows about complex electric system or Luhmann in sociology, the society is divided in two things. Communication is the message that we told to ourselves of the society, and interaction, what happened. So you have a notional side, a tangible side. And then this gets to a problem I have with the definition of social metabolism. Social metabolism refer to the society, communication. It was the economists talk about. You know? I would propose to use societal metabolism, because the societal metabolism is what is happening in the tangible side. So what we need to do is to understand better what are the process, the limitation they are constraining what can be done in the metabolic pattern of the society, and what are the implications for our communications. Not the reverse, because unfortunately, the economies are assuming that there are price. If you assume that there are price is a limited scarcity, you don't have a sustainability problem. If you are assuming that you have price, there is no sustainability problem, because you have backstop technology, the possibility of changing. So you are avoiding the problem of sustainability in the first place. So you start getting communication. Yes, communication, we can do, we can. If you want to check the quality of this, you have to go into the biophysical part. It is feasible, it is viable, it is desirable. If you don't make this check, you can discuss on the national side as much as you want. That is the way it's happening now. So you come out with policy legend. We do the circular economy, you do zero emission. This is fantastic. Zero emission. I have a Japanese friend that does it. And he said, guys, stop breathing. There is anybody that still, then let's talk of something else. But I mean, unfortunately, this is the way that the policy is informed at the moment with policy legend. And I believe that in this way, I think that the societal metabolism, not social, but societal, will be very important in improving the quality also, because he put on the time way of defining things. For instance, you have transition. What is a transition? You have to move from one possible metabolism to another possible metabolism. Do we want to discuss about this? This has to be compatible with the environment, compatible with technology, compatible with the humans are expecting. You know, you start having criteria to discuss, because here anybody discuss bioeconomy. I was in the commission. What do you mean with bioeconomy? Bioeconomy. You know that we are using in a very sloppy way all the terms that we should be a little bit more. When you start saying, okay, what is the other side, on the tangible side, what we are talking about in the notional side, it will be very useful to have more informed discussion rather than what we are having now, the wishful thinking. We solve the problem. Look what happened with Putin and the war, no? I believe that it is one of the most, to me, really a shame. I mean, what these people have been doing for the last 20 years, nobody realized that we were depending 80% of import. I mean, and let alone food, let alone labor. We import the equivalent of 120 million workers equivalent in what we import. I mean, and they say we are doing very well, we are sustainable, the emission are going down. It's not true. If you're looking at the killing curve, the emissions are going out in a linear terms. We are living in matrix. I mean, they are told, yeah, they are telling us things. They are no relation whatsoever with what happened on the tangible side. We are in the communication side. So in a way, the metabolism is a way of putting in connection what we are talking about, or what is the constraints that you find on the tangible side. So I believe that this has a very bright future, but it would say it would require to move away from reductioning, stop to have linear transformation, definition of energy. Energy doesn't exist. You have energy formed within autocatalytic process. You don't have input-output. Unfortunately, I'm not sure whether we are going there. This is another point.
Thanks a lot. Thanks a lot. I think all the contributions are excellent and very much related to each other. I will comment just briefly because I was supposed to do so before opening the floor to your questions. And well, as you know, I live in, probably you know, I live in Brazil, so we had a kind of very dramatic 4 years in Brazil, to say the least. And during this period, I pushed myself to think twice about what we do, because as you know, there is a very strong extreme right movement. And what is remarkable in Brazil is that it's a popular movement. It's not like in the past, that you know, the extreme right was represented by the military, and there were coup d'etats, and you know, the left was always in the, you know, the right side of the story. But nowadays, what we have is a very popular extreme right movement that almost won an election after a disastrous government. So the point is that now that we're listening to you, well, I'm listening to you. I mean, for example, in the case of perception of risk, we always in ecological economics, we study the perception of risk of genetically modified organisms, right? And why it's important. But what about vaccine? The anti-vaccine movement have the same kind of concerns about uncertainties, of deep uncertainties. But we, as scientists, left-wing scientists, we try to disconsider that and say that's, wow, it's just bullshit. That's, yeah, I mean, there's no evidence to support that kind of fear. Or about, for example, whose activist count? Is only left-wing activism that we are going to study? Or should we also pay attention to extreme right activism? These days, the streets of Brazil are full of activists fighting for their rights to have a dictatorship. And so we have a very strong bias in the subject with the study. And so we have a very quite anti-environmentalist government. For us, one in the history of Brazil was very unique in a sense of very frontal anti-indigenous movement, anti-environmentalist, and people voted for that. And we cannot say, well, we can say well, fake news or whatever, but I don't believe that story. I think actually a lot of people are anti-environmentalists, at least in Brazil. It is also rising here in Europe. So, and we don't know anything about those people because we don't pay attention to them. We don't understand them. We don't understand the social life because of our own, you know, very strong ideological biases. So that's what be my first. The same. What I like very much you said about communication, the gap between communication and metabolism. So we criticize green growth, but the reality is that in Latin America we live in an extractivist economy. So why is that myth? Green growth is myth, and not post-extractivism is not myth in the same way. Because, well, if you want more education, you need to sell more soybeans. That's that reality. in Brazil at least. Or post-development or deep growth, they are not lead, but the need is the green growth. And so I think that we have to pay more attention to what we study and try to get out of our bubbles and to be more modest about, you know, the way we relate also with other people that, especially with people that think very different to us. So, and then I will open the floor, we will open the floor for questions. It's like a coffee, but then you have coffee there. If you want to, please.
So I have a question, some related questions to Maria and Pedro. So do you think that another metabolism is possible? And if it's possible, what can we do to trigger this phase transition? And do you think this transition could happen before or after the collapse?
Good question. Look, if you believe this, this is the standard of biosemiotics. That is, the image that you have in the notional side is used to make the tangible side, could be the genome, make the phenotype make the genome. You have this continuous resonance. What keeps together a society is a shared definition of the common good. So basically, because if you do not believe in your group identity, you do not participate in immigration that is happening altogether, the families go away, the African come here, no? The system just collapsed. So we need to have meat. And the meat that we have at the moment is the American dream. Okay? The American dream is oil. You cannot have, people do not know, but in this society, 60% of the population is dependent. Okay? The 40% that is not dependent works only for 18% of the time. So basically you have the less than 10% of the time is in working and 90% of the time is in consuming. The 10% that is working, 60, 70% in the service sector that is consuming as well. So basically all the energy that we consume in 1 year is produced by 8 hours of labor. You want to divide this, is gigajoule per hour of labor. Right? Either you have oil or forget it. All these alternatives is policy legend. So do we want to change this? Yes. It is possible to do? Yes. But we have to start looking at how does it work. Otherwise, you get like Greta, that as soon as they is getting cold, he wants to have nuclear reactors. And this is not the way of doing environmentalists. So can we change? We have to change our social practice, not behavior. This is an invention of economists. We don't have behavior. We have social practice. We have role inside a household. We have a role inside a community. It's not that humans can decide overnight their behavior. This is a ridiculous concept. But I mean, so you have to change social practice. You have to change how you do it inside and what type of constraints you have outside. This discussion, to the best of my knowledge, is not done. Everyone saying, we got 80% of CO2. I mean, if you look at the highway, you see trucks. These are trucks that are bringing food to the cities. Okay? If you don't have these trucks, the city do not eat. So we cut tomorrow, let me see, we don't cut anything. We don't have any alternative liquid fuel. We don't have, no. Either we start discussing for real about the fact that we have a problem, and you can solve all the problem. As soon as you say to stop the denial, you can solve the problem. But then is the tragedy of change. You have to change what you do. Nobody wants, you know. Greta is fantastic. So we go back to nuclear. I mean,
This is not true.
yeah, she said nuclear, no. I know. I read that she, as a matter of fact, I saw an interview and they said, but however, this is the issue that is a very complex thing. Probably we do not have the tool to analyze the complexity of the situation. So we are going with wishful thinking all over. We got We do.
So we will collect a couple of questions because we have to finish at 12. So and then you give the floor to so if you have some questions from it.
Hi, Tommaso Russati from Pisa. Just again, a question for Mario. How do you communicate complexity on TikTok? Because the example that you did is about a wrong reading of what Greta said, which was popularized by everyone. Okay, because she said we can prolong a bit for a few years the nuclear plants rather than turning coal plants on. And this was completely mystified by the media telling how Greta is supporting nuke. And so our world is a TikTok world. So every sentence that a person says is taken out of the context and is not there. So the question is
Look,
we need to use TikTok because people use TikTok.
This is the problem.
Instagram.
Einstein used to say, make as simple as possible, but not simpler. And other things is that the definition of complexity in mathematics is an object is complex when you cannot reduce its representation without losing relevant information. So the real issue is complex things require a lot of discussion, having different opinion because nobody can see the thing. Everyone has an aspect of it. So you have to talk, we have to confront, and we are no longer doing it. We have been intoxicated by economics, neoclassical economics, which you have a major simplification of what to do. As long as the GDP goes up, everyone will be happy, or if we have a problem, we will solve it. And we have been decomplexifying. And we are, but on the other hand, I agree with you that we don't have enough information, time to check all the information you get. So it's unavoidable to get this type of things.
Yeah, let's collect a couple of questions, please. Yeah.
Well, this is open for everyone. Maybe Roland can add some thoughts on this. My question is how us as scientists can better look at certain systemic problems that we have that we don't look that often. Is that criminal activity and corruption and the links between these two with environmental problems. For example, in Brazil, we have the gold mining situation in the Amazon region. And there are clear links between these illegal activity with narco traffickers and several other things. So in Latin America, we have loads of environmental problems that are not exactly, you cannot look at big corporations directly as the main force there, but you can see a very systemic process that involves a lot of corruption and illegal activity, criminal activity altogether. So how can we, as scientists, advance on this frontier? Because I don't think we can do much if we don't tackle this, at least in Latin America, what I see.
Yeah.
I was more question on the mix between plurality of knowledge and right-wing protesters. Is there any research trying to link those discourses and trying to meet like indigenous people and researchers and people from like that, like popular right-wing activists? Is there any incentives or like creation or like policies or like trying to educate the three different groups to connect and actually have a discourse together? Because in the plurality of knowledge, it's true that the right-wing protesters are not being included at all. And maybe even if we don't agree with their voice, it's still a big voice. So.
Any other additional question? So I will give the floor. And then we will give the floor to the users.
Maybe you can just briefly try to comment on her question and then throw mine as well. and let's see. No, on the role of the criminal, of the organized crime and illegal mining, etc. To be honest, I would love to get training in investigative journalism and to learn different methodologies and different ethics also in research. because that's also an important point to think of. For example, in academia, we're required to disclose the identity of interviews, or if not the name, at least, you know, where you interview, when, etc., etc. So you are expected to disclose details on your research and potentially make it replicable for other researchers, right? In journalism is not the case. There's a different ethic there. So yeah, as my colleagues and myself, we have been facing a bit this challenge, and yeah, I completely agree with you. If I may, for my question is on the topic of scale. So, for example, when you talk about, we are all, you know, we are in this communication. So we are kind of in this, we're within this worldview of, yeah,
Policy legend.
policy legends, exactly. I'm also asking, who are this we, this collective we? There are many communities and peoples on this planet who are not following those dogmas, let's say. So my question would be how social metabolism or society metabolism studies, how can it contribute to potential transformations, or an outscale also of different practices, which are maybe more at the local level, not at the global level. So yeah, I already asked you this question.
Well, I want to just maybe answer the question there on this. If there is researcher that tends to bring this different knowledge, and well, I mean, I say I'm participating in this IBEST platform, right? This is like a group of scientists trying to think about how you do transformative change to tell the governments of the world, right? How they should do, and this has been commissioned by the governments of the world. It seems that they want to change. So you have, but so there. I mean, the point there is that there is this big push to bring other ways, right? To bring indigenous knowledge. Now there is like this group on bringing activists to actually say, okay, what examples do we have that have worked, right? But so I will say there is this debate that is starting. No, there is like, okay, discussions on how you think of this reality as a complex thing that everyone has a view, and unless you have multiple evidence that come from different knowledge, you don't see the complexity. So the debate is there. The problem is that this is all embedded in power relations, right? So it doesn't have the same value if I say something that if an activist to the policymakers, I'm meaning other people might not consider. So yeah.
But they can maybe find a common ground in similar ways of being oppressed, like right-wing activists are being oppressed in some ways, that they can find a common ground with indigenous people, such as the gay movement and LGBT and the workers and coal mines in the UK managed to join forces, but they were very different, and most of the workers were very homophobic, but they still managed to see a common ground.
On the basis.
On the
right?
basis of being oppressed.
How you pass that to.
Yeah, but the dialogue can start at a similar, like they can find a similarity at first and then try to work together.
Yeah, I mean, no, I mean, I agree. I also see in some cases with the case of indigenous people, there is also like the contrary, there is a need of differentiating. So everyone wants, like, I mean, when you, like, there is now these kind of like criticisms that when you talk about indigenous people, you homogenize. It's like, okay, it's all indigenous. And as if, and it says, no, every one of us has a different worldview or a different, so the fight of one group is not the fight of the other. And when we are trying to make these generalizations to do a common fight, in some cases they say, oh, why do you use indigenous people and local communities as if we were one? And we as a scientist or some activism try to homogenize, and there is also like this need to be acknowledged as a group, separate from the other. So there is also a tension there of like, okay, maybe the fight, we can fight for one point together, but that doesn't make us equal in all the problems that we face, because people face different problems. So there is also a complexity on bringing alliances, because they might be allied for one particular point, no, but not for the others. So, but no, I mean, I think.
Yeah, very, very short answer. If you are, you can use societal metabolism analysis to do what we proposed to do in the last project, do quantitative storytelling, okay? You start getting into, it is possible to have electric car? No, because we don't have enough electricity, we don't have enough material, so what we are talking about. It is possible to do biofuel? No, it is possible. So you can use numbers to show that what they are doing doesn't work. What are the 3 points that you can do? You can, one, challenge the myth, the American dream, and this is about individuals. Each of us should recognize that we have a problem and we have to change and stop to believe that the technology will save us. Okay. Second, you have to change institution, and this probably is the most difficult thing, because institutions are types. So types cannot change, you have to replace it. Instance can change, but types no. And the third thing is you have to change narratives. So stop to use policy legend and do other narrative to explain what's going on, because we don't want. So what can do societal metabolism in the field of sustainability? Doing these things. Force individual to reconsider our common good, the capitalism and American dream. Second, force the institution to see the problem they should work in a different way. And third, be capable of checking the quality of the narratives, to stop to use policy legend for solving our problems. So this is what are the possible uses of societal metabolism.
I want to end with a provocative comment, Mario, because although I agree with you, you always use the word "we have to change," and we are, most of us in this room, and I think Roldan was mentioning this, that we think that our view is mainstream, that change is required, that everyone sees collapse, as Sylvia used, and that people worry about this collapse. And I want to be provocative before coffee, just basically saying, not everyone agrees that there is such a thing as a collapse. Not everyone agrees that we need to change anything. And that's really the challenge we face. Because and it goes to Vicky's point about legitimacy. We are all scientists here, we believe in science, we see, knowledge accumulating about biodiversity laws, about tipping points in global climate, et cetera. But not everyone's values speaks to this knowledge or relates to this knowledge, and we have to confront this. It's really the
Yeah, but I don't have any problem with that. The problem is, in order to change, you have to have a group identity.
And you talked about exactly.
And
that's the challenge.
This is why we don't change, because we do not have group identity which identify we as needing to change. But what it is important, and I think that this is where really the work of Vicky is crucial, is that in order to put together different we, you have to use feelings, affective interaction, passion. Otherwise, with rational things, we are right, our models show, who cares about what your models show? I mean, the real issue is you have an agreement on identity based on your gut feelings. And then you start considering that maybe you get in love with the person of pro-Bolsonaro, and you start thinking maybe after all they are no monsters. No? But I mean, the issue start there. This has been totally missed by economic analysis, whatever. The society runs on feelings, doesn't run on models. And this, there is no way of putting.
And what is the history of humanity telling us about these shared feelings? It doesn't work out.
In fact, I agree with Sylvia that unless you have some sort of collapse, it is very difficult to convince everybody that maybe the American dream is not possible. So let's hope not, and then let's hope that it's not because of the war.
But the point is that, because I understood that you use the word policy legend as a problem, but politicians only work with policy legends. They are not interested in metabolism, and the policy legends create, as you said, identity. So exactly what we have now is like at least in many parts of the world, two policy legends competing with each other, trying to take power. And we are somehow trying to understand what is going on, but we cannot really understand what is going on because we are a kind of privileged elite that has benefited from the power distribution among knowledge systems. And we have this wonderful building because somebody decided that it's good to have scientists like us talking about these issues. But that is precisely what is being challenged now by the extreme right. That who are you? I mean, who are you to say that conspiracy theories are not local knowledge? I mean, why when some indigenous peoples say something, you say it's local knowledge, when the conspiracy theories from the extreme right, you say it's not local knowledge, indigenous knowledge. And then we start to move our floors. So it's a kind of paradox that we are part of this system that put us in a privileged position, in an elite position, and when you want to destroy it.
The elite means to go to Davos, for instance. Then who goes to Davos from us? Well, Vicky perhaps is invited. You are invited.
I have to the biodiversity.
But just one of us, and we'll never be invited. And so we are not elite in that sense.
Well, I don't think that most people
And we are not rich
I think
people, we are not plutocratic, we are.
coming to Barcelona to speak is a kind of but yeah, we will have more time to talk after your presentation. Thank you very much for.
Oh, the copy there, but
Actually, to have like applications between actually this angriness against
I think it's